Are you asking, is it conceivable that some other eschatological approach could be correct and that the rapture idea will be used against the church? Is that your question? Okay. I'm actually concerned about that because it's certainly true that the reason there's an eschatological debate is because there's a debate. I mean, there are passages that can be taken 2, 3, 4 ways. There are ambiguities in the text at even fundamental eschatological levels. Let me give you an example and then tell you why I'm concerned about this. Very, very basic, simple things like the 70th week of Daniel being equated with the tribulation. There's no verse that actually says that. Now, it's logical because it's 7 and 7. And so everybody assumes that, but there's no verse that actually says that. There are, let me ask you, just throw out the question, and I think you'll answer it in a certain way because it's a fairly straightforward question. If you had somebody come up to you and say, hey, I've been reading the Gospels, and over here in Matthew Jesus says X, Y, Z, and over here in Mark it's obviously the same event, and it's not exactly what's over in Matthew. I think that one of them has to be wrong. You know, what would you say? Now, chances are we'd probably say something like, well, we need to harmonize the synoptic gospels. We need to put all the things together to get the fuller picture. You know, and that's very easy to adopt that approach. I think it's the right approach. Well, the very idea of a rapture is in part based upon differences in descriptions of, we'll say, a coming. Well, this passage over here in 1 Thessalonians 5 can't refer to what's going on in 1 Thessalonians 4 or Matthew or whatever, because the details over here don't precisely match the details over here. And so the dispensational approach to Scripture, which is where the rapture idea flourishes, says that must mean that there are two events. In other words, there, in prophecy, instead of harmonizing, which is what we would all do in the Gospels, then we keep the passages apart, and we come up with a rapture and a second coming. Now, it may be that we're supposed to keep them apart, and we have a rapture and a second coming, but it may be that we're supposed to harmonize. I mean, there are just fundamental methodological things like that, like those two examples, that have made for debate. And so it's entirely possible that another scenario is the right position. For instance, if you harmonize the eschatological comings, what that does in practical terms is it eliminates the rapture, and you have a second coming. Now let's just pick that one for example. Let's say that turns out to be the correct position. If that's the case, then if you take a scenario like Jim has been talking about, and I don't know if I've told you this, but I've been wondering about the same thing for the last couple of years.
Sequel material, huh?
Yeah. Well, don't go there. I'm not.
I'm sorry.
Make a great novel.
Please, you know. I don't want to give away the store here.
Part 2.
But if that's the case, then what you're left with is a rapture that, let's say, raptures the New Agers and whoever, and Christians are left behind. And then if like 7 years later or some within the 7-year window, you're not gone, what I think would happen was you'd have a situation exactly like you have in Babel in Ezekiel's day. You're sitting by the river Kivar, and you're saying, we're the sons of God. We're the promised children of God. What are we doing here? I mean, our butts are in Babylon. We're slaves. Did God forsake us? It's exactly what they were asking. And they were the people of God. The righteous with the unrighteous suffered the effect of the Babylonian invasion. And you know, it's you know, you can point to church history and talk about Christian suffering and all that kind of stuff, but I want to keep it in a biblical perspective. If that's the case, my concern is that a scenario like that could just crush the will of the church. And that's I mean, if I can think of it, I'm sure that they've already thought of that and you know, run it through the mill, and done the war games that would be associated with that in the head. So I'm concerned about it. I don't think in any of these alien scenarios or whatever would turn out to happen, if anything. I don't think that legitimizes or illegitimizes any particular eschatological view. But if we're on the same radar, I'm concerned about that could be used against the church.
We're going to move on.
About the prophecy in general.
I think a lot of things are in a gray shaded area, and it's done on purpose that way. And if the Bible doesn't teach us anything else, man's nature, we always want to bag, tag, and classify everything and have an answer for everything. And it just doesn't happen. Unconditional prophecy is never known until it's already too late for man to mess it up, or it's till after the fact so that we can go back and look and go, oh, that's where we're at. There's a definite God-ordained strategy to this, and that is that by the time we're going to put our trust and faith and hope in assumed events, we're not putting it in Jesus Christ. If we're following His Spirit right now today, God, so many people I've talked to, well, I'm going to get it together. When that mark comes out, boy, that's when I'm going to get it together. You know what? If you're not going to get it together today, you will not get it together tomorrow.